The Rambam says that Achnosas Orchim is greater than greeting the face of the Shechina, as the Pasuk says. This is in the beginning of our Parsha. Vayar v'hinei shloisha anoshim. This is the middle of the revelation of Hashem to Avraham Avinu, and the Pasuk says, Vayar, Avraham Avinu sees there are 3 men. The Rebbe's question is, what is the proof from these 4 words that greeting guests is greater than Kabbalas Pnei Shechina? Now, the Gemara brings a proof from the Pasuk further on in our story, where Avraham turns to Hashem and says, if I find favor in your eyes, please don't pass, don't leave. I would like to go and greet these guests. Now, seemingly, this is a clearer proof. So why is the Rambam changing and giving a different proof from a different pasuk than that which the Gemara does, which seems to be a pasuk that's less clear? Now, as far as what's the proof from the pasuk that he sees 3 men, we could say that the actual fact that as Hashem is appearing to him, he's seeing and noticing these people, clearly to the extent paying enough attention that he wants to run towards them, that itself is a proof that greeting the guests is even greater than Kabbalas Pnei Shechina. But the question still remains, why is the Rambam moving away from the proof of the Gemara, which would seem to be a better and stronger proof? Says the Rebbe, seemingly we would be able to answer why the Rambam does not bring the proof from the pasuk that the Gemara brings, Vayoymar, that Avraham says, Adnai, im no motzasi chen beinecha, Hashem, if I find favor in your eyes, please don't leave, etc. Because really there's a machloikus in the Gemara when it says the word Adnai over here, whether it's referring to Hashem, and then it would be a proof. Avraham is saying to Hashem, don't leave, because I want to greet the guests. Or is Avraham speaking to the Malachim, just asking the Malachim not to leave and come into his tent? If it's to the Malachim, then clearly it's no proof at all. And therefore maybe the Rambam doesn't want to bring this pasuk, because it's not so clear. But the truth of the matter is we can't answer this because the Rambam himself in his Sefer Halacha says that this name is actually considered a holy name, the name of Hashem, and therefore, once again, it's not a proof. Once again, it would be a good proof that he's turning to Hashem and saying, don't leave, I want to greet these people. So why doesn't the Rambam bring that pasuk? The Rebbe attempts another answer. The Rebbe says in the Moira Nevuchim, the Rambam writes that this whole story was actually not a story that has happened physically, but rather it was all part of a vision, a nevuah, part of the godly revelation that Avraham Avinu has, seeing these people and greeting them, etc. However, and therefore says the Rebbe, maybe we wouldn't bring a solid proof from the pasuk where Avraham is telling Hashem, don't leave because I want to greet the guests, because it's not actually something physically happening, he's interrupting to greet the guests. Rather, this is all just part of his vision. But, says the Rebbe, if that's the case, then it's no proof from the first pasuk that the Rambam brings either, where it says that he saw 3 people, because once again, that's also only part of his vision. In addition to this, says the Rebbe, it's very difficult to learn that that's what the Rambam means over here in the Sefer Halacha, because in our Rambam it does seem to be that the story actually happened physically and literally. In order to understand all of this, the Rebbe explores a little bit more the halacha in the Rambam that discusses this mitzvah of Achnosas Orchim. The Rambam is discussing various mitzvahs of the Chachamim that we need to do as part of Gemilus Chasodim, etc. And the Rambam mentions visiting the sick, comforting the mourners, Ulalavois Orchim, accompanying the guests. Now it's interesting, the Rambam does not say Achnosas Orchim, he speaks about accompanying the guests. Also in the next halakha, where the Rambam gives much more details about this whole mitzvah, and how Avraham Avinu taught us the way in greeting guests, etc. There's once again a very, very big emphasis specifically on this idea of accompanying the guests after they leave. In fact, the Rambam says that someone that is not accompanying the guest is as if he spills blood. So to understand what is this whole business about accompanying the guests, the Rebbe explains, generally when we speak about Gemilus Chasadim, helping other people, giving people things that they need, there's really 2 aspects, 2 points. There is that which is achieved, that which was done. The person received what he needed, what he was lacking. And then there is the midah of chesed, the kindness being shown and being expressed by the person who's doing the kindness. In Achnosas Orchim, you have what the visitor, the guest is receiving, his food and his drink. And you have the kindness, the feeling, the compassion, the care of the host. Now, generally speaking, in most areas of Gemilus Chasadim, the most important thing is what the person received. We know the famous example: if a person loses a coin, if somebody else finds it and uses it for parnasa, the person who lost it still did a mitzvah of tzedakah. By achnasas orchim, however, there's a special chiddush. There's something unique. The kindness that the host is showing is actually extremely important to the person receiving it, and it's very much part of the achnasas orchim of that which he is receiving. In other words, when you're invited guests and you're giving him food and drink, etc., it has to be in a way that the person is feeling that everything you're doing is coming because of your care, because of your interest, because of your avas Yisrael. And that's really the whole idea of what the Rambam speaks about, accompanying the guest after he leaves. Seemingly, this is not something anymore that he needs. It's not like food and drink. But what is it an expression? It's an expression of care, of showing that you're really interested. You care about this visitor, so even after he's leaving your house, you're still accompanying him. And therefore, the visitor, the guest, feels that everything you've done for him was also coming from your sincere care, that you really care about his benefit and his good, etc. And this is what the Rambam is saying is really this law that Avraham Avinu instituted with his chesed, speaking about this idea of accompanying the guests. In other words, not just the general idea of achnasas orchim, but the chesed that's invested in it, the kindness, the generosity, the care that comes along with it, which is specifically, again, expressed when you're actually accompanying the guest afterwards, taking him along on his way. Says the Rebbe, this is also the meaning of someone that doesn't accompany his friend, is as if he's spilling the blood. What are we talking about? Well, we mainly mean spilling blood. It says when you embarrass someone, when you cause someone shame and disgrace, it's as if spilling his blood. In a similar way over here, if he walks out of the house feeling that you gave him food and drink and all of that, but it wasn't with sincere care, and you just gave it to him, but without really that feeling of avas Yisrael, etc., then that's causing that even the food and drink that he had is coming along with a bit of a disgrace, and that's why it's like shvichos damim, spilling blood. Now, says the Rebbe, will understand the proof that the Rambam brings from Vayar v'hine shloisha anoshim, that Avraham Avinu sees the three people. Because it's coming in continuation to this whole attitude of how achnasas orchim has to be. And this starts not when he's accompanying the guest afterwards, obviously also when he's giving the food and drink, but really this all starts as soon as you see the visitor, as soon as you see the guest. You're already showing him that you notice him, that you care about him, that you're paying attention to him. And this is clearly expressed in this idea that Avraham Avinu, as he's greeting the Shekhinah, what does he do? He sees, he's noticing the guests, and automatically that makes the guest feel so much more wanted and cared about, etc. And that's why this is the pasuk that the Rambam specifically brings. Based on all of this, says the Rebbe, another thing will be answered. And the question is, seemingly, since after the fact we know that these were not actually human beings, but they were malachim, who don't even need food and drink, so a double question. Number one, how can we say that Avraham Avinu seemingly stumbled and did something? He ended up interrupting his conversation with the Shekhinah for greeting guests who don't even need his help. Number one. Secondly, how can we learn out a true inyan in Torah, inyan in halacha, that greeting guests is more important than greeting the Shekhinah, from something that seemingly was not even absolutely real because they didn't need his help? Says the Rebbe, so we need to say that really his achnasas orchim was in the most real and perfect way. And why is that? Based on what we explained before. Because in achnasas orchim, what's so crucially important is the chesed, the kindness, the care, the empathy, etc. from the host. And therefore, by Avraham Avinu, from Avraham Avinu, in other words, what Avraham Avinu was doing, that part of it was 100% there. Even if they didn't actually need it, but he expressed in that achnasas orchim all of that chesed. And in truth, even as far as the malachim were concerned, they also took, it was also b'shleimus, also in the most perfect way. Why? Because the actual fact, even if they didn't need a food and drink, but the actual fact that Avraham Avinu, the host, is giving them all this attention, all of this care, and especially Avraham Avinu specifically, who's even greater than malachim, he's giving them this attention, so that itself, again, for them would be so meaningful, just like a regular, ordinary visitor receiving such care from his host. And therefore, in this particular case, the achnasas orchim of Avraham Avinu was in the most perfect way, both as far as the host is concerned, as well as the visitors, the malachim.